Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Nutritional Revolution podcast. It's Kyla here, and we have a pretty rad guest for you guys. We have Peter Stetina. He has been in 8 Grand Tours. He had a big life-threatening accident in 2015 we're going to dive into and talk about maybe some nutrition around that. But he's also just took the quadruple crown for the Belgian Waffle Series. He's set couple FKTs, White Rim Trail and Kokopelli. We'll dive into that. Podiumed tons of races, Leadville, you name it. And he has his own race that he's hosts, the Stetina's Pay Dirt, that we're going to dive into as well. So thank you, Peter, for joining us today.
Of course. Yeah. That's thanks for having me on.
Of course. And Peter's tuning in from Santa Rosa today, but from what I understand, you spend some of your time also in Tahoe, right?
Yeah, that's my happy place.
Awesome.
Growing up in Colorado originally and mountain kid at heart, ended up in Northern California and love it for the riding, but yeah, get up to the mountains. So, and then the whole lake life there, it's something special. So,
Yes.
I do kind of I guess you call me a snowbird, right? Like, is that the people that don't like the snow? Like the older people that like go to Florida or Arizona in the winter?
Yeah.
Like I'm in Santa Rosa more in the winter months, and then summer up in the mountains.
Yes, you're on my level. That's what I'm all about. I love Tahoe, and the summer, fall is amazing. So kind of take us back a little bit. What got you interested in cycling to begin with?
Gosh, just growing up in the cycling hotbed of Boulder, born and raised there. And it was a normal sport there. It wasn't really like a fringe sport like many other places, and then, as an up and coming kid and the whole Lance Armstrong era when he was crushing the Tour de France, that's the sport exploded more. Yeah. And it just kind of became started on the mountain bike, but then, quickly because of that Lance effect, road is where the talent pipeline funneled, and I slowly just normal development story of getting picked up by USA Cycling, going to Europe, starting to do bigger races, signing a pro contract through that, and just kind of
just a normal progression to the normal Grand Tours, no big deal. So I mean, there's so many areas I want to dive into with you. Obviously, we hone in a lot on athlete-specific nutrition and hydration. You've had quite the experience, obviously, doing more road-specific racing at a very high level, and then now kind of taking first quadruple crowns, et cetera, in gravel. And I'd love to kind of dive into, actually, I'm going to stop right there. We forgot 2 truths and a lie. We have to do Peter's 2 truths and a lie. So do you remember what your 2 truths are? Or do you want me to?
I do. Yeah. Okay. I had to think about them. I'm glad you gave me the heads up, because I can never I'm not that spontaneous. Very, very jealous of folks who are. All right. So my 2 truths and a lie are, for 3 years, I had a pass that got me free unlimited Chipotle burritos anywhere in the nation.
That's pretty epic.
Pretty rad.
Yeah.
Number 2 is, while I was growing up in Colorado, I haven't actually hiked a 14er, which is super popular, but I have biked to the top of them multiple times.
Okay.
And number 3 is, in high school, my buddies and I had a wheelie competition, and I won the competition by wheeling the entire length of the football field.
Okay. I feel like all of these could be true. Nia, what do you think is his lie?
I definitely think that 2 is true. That totally makes sense considering your background.
Yes. Yeah.
Number 1, I feel like you could have gotten unlimited anything from Chipotle, not just burritos. So I'm going to hinge on that tiny little detail.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I was kind of thinking
right.
Maybe he from a race something, or maybe he got sponsored by Chipotle and they gave him free burritos for 3 years or something. yeah, I feel like all of these could be true, but I guess I'll go with number one as well as the lie, but don't tell us yet because you're going to reveal it at the end. And we want to do those before obviously you start telling us about your whole life history. So we kind of don't know yet, but let's dive into, now that we kind of have those out there, the listeners can guess themselves as well, depending on how well they know you already. But we're honing on number one is the lie. So we'll get that reveal at the end, you guys. So from changing from road to gravel, and maybe we can kind of educate some of the listeners too on durations, intensities. I mean, I would imagine intensity racing is always going to be a high level of intensity, but getting hand to mouth nutrition on a gravel bike versus road, how has that nutrition kind of evolved going from a road based to gravel based racing?
Gosh, yeah, you're right. It is very different. And I'm actually really excited about this podcast because nutrition is a big part of what I do. And I think you'll see, depending on how we talk, is I don't just think of food as fuel. I definitely eat to ride as well. I enjoy it too much. So maybe I don't always have the best habits, but I know the right ways, but you also have to be a human and balance real life and desire. So yeah, in the road, everything is so scientific and streamlined and processed, right? Not the food, but like actually the food too, but more of like the way and the timing and all of that, because you are on smoother pavement and you really just have to kind of decide between the moment in the race and the moment in the race and the terrain, for example, versus off-road riding. It's more about getting it down quick because of the bumps and the terrain, right? If you have one hand off the bars eating or drinking, you hit a rock and you biff it, right? So so there's that whole other complexity, right? And more of the balance aspect. And also gravel racing is predominantly self-supported, or maybe one or two checkpoints where you can refill, just because they're so long you can't carry everything. But in road racing, you always have like that team car back there in the feed zone. So it's like you kind of just go back for unlimited aid as you need.
Yeah. That's nice. And goodness.
So I guess expanding on that just quickly is road is just kind of like unlimited buffet, right? As much as you can take on. So a lot of sugars, just keep it pouring in, keep your energy levels always topped off. Whereas gravel is more survivalist, fat burning type of efforts. And you still need the sugars, right, to compete, but it's going to be more of like the sustenance style thought.
Yeah. And with kind of the thinking back to like your road racing days, what were some of the things you were eating and consuming then? Was it like the real food situation, like the the rice cake, stuff? Or...
Alan Lim was like one of my first coaches ever.
Oh, no
who started
way.
Stretch Lab. So I was on what was the Garmin team, what is now EF, when he founded his rice bars. He was coming to races with us and cooking them in the rice cooker, and sweet and savory, and I always went for the sweet ones. He had some pretty good concoctions.
We'll have to include his books in the show notes too. He has 2 like feed zone cookbooks. Nia, we'll put those in the show notes for people. I like the simplicity of some like real food, but it's simple enough. Like if you're at a high intensity, there's things that can work really well. So that's awesome. Any other like fueling products or hydration products that were go-tos during that time?
It was always, we always had a sponsor, right? So whether it was, Cliff Bar has been one of my longest running sponsors, but some teams we had Power Bar or some Euro company that did gels and bars and all that. But it was always kind of just a blend of bars, gummies, and gels. But then, you always had room for real food. So, in Europe, it was very traditional when you roll through the feed zone. That's when you get, a little satchel to sling over your shoulder and quick grab like a whole new restock. And that would often have some other treats that are easily digestible. So some classics in Europe are like a little like Hawaiian bread roll, like super simple white bread with like a slather of Nutella and a slice of banana in it, or the Stroop waffles, which now they're all marketed to sports and stuff in the US. Someone had a good business idea, but those are literally just like ho-hos in the Euro grocery stores, right? Like you just buy the Stroop waffles. So in racing, that was founded as you just fold it up, put it in some foil, and throw it in your pocket. So definitely a big fan of real food. Sport has definitely changed to more of these like always these isotonic gels, easy pH or digestible stuff. But I don't know, like there's still a space for real food. And I'm a big believer in that.
Did you ever deal with any GI issues, like pushing the nutrition or hydration too much in racing at all?
I mean, yeah, everyone has at some point, but nothing. It's not like I ever had an issue, but especially in the older gels, but like nowadays, like I said, they're so isotonic and easily digestible. But early day gels, it was, it's like a sugar bomb, and it would give you proper gut rot. Like you'd have to take a bunch of water with it, and you don't want to take too many. And even still, like I kind of find my limit at like even 4 for a long race, and so I kind of generally, this is like a philosophy of mine for race fueling, right? You treat the gels like your nitrous boost. If anyone's ever watched like Need for Speed, right? You have like that little
Fast
boost,
and
like, the Fast and Furious. But like you hit the button and it's like boof, but you only have the button like once or twice, right?
Right.
So gels are like that. And so you have to use it very strategically. And if any good racer knows, you don't hit it too soon. So stick on your solid foods, the things that you know how to digest for a while. For at least basically the first half of the race. Like I'm on hard bars and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Nutella sandwich, whatever you like, right? A lot of dense calories, some protein's okay. Very light protein, but maybe I start with like a heavier, like the proper Cliff Bar, and then I move more towards like cookies and more simpler type of snacks. And then you kind of transition to like your high, almost like a gel, like your blocks, your gummies, those chews. And then you kind of like in the last third of the race, start thinking more about just like sugar and gels. And so I always every race kind of follows that. That arc, if you will.
I love that. That's exactly how we will program nutrition typically for definitely for our triathletes, but also our like ultra. I think that's smart. Do you ever run into, I think you mentioned you like some savory stuff, but do you ever run into like the flavor fatigue of maybe bringing along too much of one flavor of something or too sweet?
You got to mix it up. I mean, even your favorite product, if you have it every single day, like racing in Europe, like you just for years it was just pasta or rice with chicken. Like that was your race meal. It's you carbo load, you have pasta. It's like, but if you end up having pasta like 80 days a year, you get sick of it, right? Like, and so like I would come home and literally like I would not go to an Italian restaurant for like the entire 3-month off season, because it's just like I can't stand it. And so you lose the joy in that. So definitely got to vary it up.
I think that's smart. We do see athletes, run into that. You talking about like longer duration stuff when we train with some of our athletes, like they'll want to stick with, for example, Martins, the whole stretch, and having something, even though they're like quote unquote unflavored, it's, it eventually, I think, still gets to some people.
Totally.
Do you ever deal with products tasting different when they're warm versus cold?
I haven't thought about that so much. Well, just chocolate coated bars, anything chocolate flavored, just not in the warm weather. Or if you do, because like, I mean, a Snickers bar in a race is amazing. You feel good off of it. It tastes good. It's like a little treat. But you got to do it early. Eat the Snickers bar fast.
Yes, before it gets too melty. So talking about kind of making the switch to more gravel, when did that happen in your career?
That was in 2019.
Okay.
There were some like grassroots events around here in NorCal called the Grasshopper Series that I would always do for fun training.
Yeah.
They were gravel before we talked about gravel, right?
Yeah.
But in 2019, I did a few of like the bigger nationally known ones, and it was just that light bulb moment where it was like, wow, this is a lot more fun.
Oh yeah.
I can be in the US more. I can make a career out of this. Like I'm gonna try to do this and make a go of it. So I was 19.
That's awesome. And kind of jumping back a little bit, I do want to dive into gravel nutrition, hydration, all that stuff, but you did have as I mentioned in the intro, a pretty terrible bike crash. And can you tell us a little bit about that? But also I'd love to dive into like, what did post crash recovery look like? And if you recall changing your nutrition or including different supplements or anything like that during that time?
Yeah. So 2015, I was in a big race and there was a unmarked metal parking post, a bollard in the middle of the road. We came around a corner in the middle of a big sprint and I smashed into it. Wow. About 40 miles an hour is the final sprint of this race. So it was totally obliterated my kneecap into a bunch of pieces, tibia cracked parallel all the way down the leg, LCL, 5 ribs, a couple weeks in the Spanish hospital, just trying to get stable to get brought back to the US. Had to relearn to walk. Oh my gosh. So it was a process. A lot of people wrote my career off, but the unfortunate part of that was I was also on a contract season. I was talking about renewing with my current team, and then those talks stalled, obviously.
Oh, shoot.
And so I kind of had a few months with my back against the wall to rehab enough to be able to race. To show I could come back.
Wow.
So that was, it was more of a back against my wall mentality than like nursing and caring for my body.
Wow.
We used science with it. I had an amazing physical therapist here in Santa Rosa, awesome. And a very good doctor team with the team I was on. And we kind of just really pushed the envelope in terms of physical therapy, like to the limit of what was probably considered. No normal doctor would sign off on that. But when you have a very, very good sports doctor, literally like checking in, bi-weekly, and a physical therapist who's hands on you every day, and it's literally your job to recover,
right,
and have a working body as an athlete, that we pushed it to the limit, but it got me through. So
wow. So how long before you kind of got on a bike again after that?
3 months. So
3 months?
3 months.
Oh
so
my
that's
gosh.
weight bearing, right? And so this happened in April, and contracts are getting solidified in late summer, early fall.
Holy smokes.
World Tour. So I couldn't bear weight for 3 months. That's a broken bone, 3 months off. Goodness. Like if you break your hip or your leg or whatever, your foot, doesn't matter.
Wow.
And you come out of surgery with a broken knee and your leg is like a stiff plank, like your knee doesn't bend, right? All the scar tissue, all the fixtures. And so you have to break that down. So I would basically be on my back, and on crutches. So I would basically be at PT and we'd be bending that knee and literally forcing this stiff plank of a leg a degree every day. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 degrees, sometimes you get none. And it's just pain tolerance. And why I say pushing it to the limit is, there's therapeutic pain, like when you're getting a deep massage, and you're like, this really hurts, but you can tell it is a good pain. Like it's almost like a healing pain. And then there's like a pain that's like, your knee is starting to crack open again. And so you got to push it right to that limit where it's like you're breaking down scar tissue, but you're not going to break the bone again. And after 3 months, I had just enough flexion in my knee to bend 120 degrees. You need 120 degrees of flexion to get over an entire bike pedal stroke, right? A whole circle. So I got clearance to pedal a bike after 3 months, and I was weight bearing. And then once you can start pedaling a bike, I mean, there's a reason bikes are such recovery machines in many medical applications, because I mean, you think about even like a low cadence, right? A 60 RPM cadence. Normally you're pedaling 80, 90 RPMs. Those 60 RPMs, revolutions per minute. You do a 1 hour ride. That's 3,600 knee bends or pedal strokes you're going to do. And a 1 hour ride is relatively short for cycling.
Yeah.
That's a recovery ride. So it's like, if you go to physical therapy, there's no way you can do 3,600 like knee bends with you or leg press or whatever it is, right? So like once I got the clearance to start riding, I was moving it more and more and more, and that kind of helps like the blood flow and the swelling and all that. So it really started cascading on itself. But I trained for 3 weeks, and then I started the Tour of Utah, which was a big race in the US at the time.
Wow.
And I could pedal because I was definitely like more one-legged. It was probably like 70%, 30% on my good leg to bad leg. But I started the Tour of Utah while walking with a cane, and I finished it. And by finishing it, my agent was able to market me to Trek, one of the other World Tour teams at the time, Trek Segafredo. And they said like, damn, like if you can do that, then we think you can make a full comeback. So I signed a minimum salary contract for the World Tour. There is a minimum salary. Even though I was an established pro at that point, they basically were like, here's a lifeline, 1 year minimum salary. We're giving you an option to make it.
Wow.
So I signed on with them and was able to salvage my career and come back for quite a few more years after that.
Wow. Gosh. And just for our listeners, what can you tell them a little bit, like how long is the Tour of Utah?
That's one of your classic week-long stage races. So I think it was, like 6 or 7 days, all through Utah, high elevation, long climbs. You race roughly average 100 miles per day or something kind of thing.
No big deal. Just
well, it was, I was able to fake it too, because racing at altitude is a lot more aerobic than strength based. I mean, you still need to be strong, but it's definitely lungs, right? Acclimation. So I could rely on my genetics having a big set of lungs more than leg strength. If I were at a very dynamic, twisty, turny acceleration race in Europe on small roads, then there's no way I would have been able to do that. But in Utah, on these big wide boulevards that dominate the US scene, right? Bigger roads, you can hide in the peloton longer, and then you just kind of sweep onto a long climb. So there's more about using experience to get through it.
Yeah. Impressive. The elevation thing too is, I always love talking about that topic. You mentioned before we hit record that you go back and forth between Santa Rosa and Tahoe. And for the listeners, Tahoe is, what is it, 6,000 plus at the lake elevation. So what is it like when you go back there when you come from Santa Rosa, what is it, 600 feet probably, and then you go up to 6,000?
It's an important part for any endurance athlete. I mean, altitude training is like one of the best things you can do. Even for racing at lower elevations, just the blood volume you get, the red blood cells, the lung strength. So it's, I mean, I've done it enough. You go back and forth. You definitely need a bit of a moment to acclimate. Growing up in Colorado, I'm a bit more used to. I seem like I transition a little faster, luckily.
That's awesome.
I don't need quite as long, but it's still,
Yeah.
It's brutal. Due to life circumstances this year, I was not able to do any altitude training. I was, doing, pregnancy stuff with my wife.
Yes.
And so I raced Leadville straight from Santa Rosa,
Oh my
from sea
goodness.
level. So I just, that was painful. I do not recommend that.
Oh, shoot. Did you go up the day before, or were you up
did.
there? Wow. Yeah. I mean, isn't that the recommendation if you can't altitude train to get up there? Yeah.
Yeah. It'll get you, 90% of the way there, but
Yeah.
it'd be way worse off if I had gone up just 2 days or 3 days before.
Right.
But I mean,
yeah.
you're still going to lose some. It's not perfect, but it's best case scenario, which is life.
Yes, exactly. So diving into gravel, you mentioned a little bit about bumpiness and things of that nature being obviously much bumpier than the road, right?
Yeah.
In most cases, depending on where you're riding on road. But and so with kind of that transition over to gravel, you mentioned kind of nutrition being a little bit different, obviously not as many feed zones. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the gravel racing you do? Like how long is it from a mileage perspective, but then also how long do these things take you? And, I know some races 100+ miles sometimes only have 2 water bottle refills. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. I set out a game plan and I basically try to lay my food out for how many hours. You don't think about distance. Think about the time it'll take you to complete your goal time. And then, grab an extra bar just in case, you need your emergency bar, your emergency gel. And you do have to think a little bit more about where you're gonna eat, have a plan on that. So if there's a really spicy section and it's gonna last a while and there's gonna be you're going to have to keep up in there or make a move in there, then it's like, kind of front load your nutrition and think about, where you can eat something on a smoother section. I do tend to take a little bit more of the gel block and even like a thicker drink mix once in a while, just because it is, again, quick hits. Just being able to get it in your mouth and then chew while your hands are back on your bars. But there's always a smooth point too. And, nothing beats when you actually eat like a whole substantial bar and how good you feel for like a whole hour, So, my general rule of thumb is a bar or its equivalent every hour. And, there's a lot of hype around these whole, I'm an old pro. There's a lot of hype around these like high carb sugar things and your 80 grams of carbs per hour stuff. And you can get so lost in the weeds there, and you have to train yourself to do that too. And I do feel like it's a little bit has been lost in efficiency and fat burning at a high level. I mean, these guys and girls are just running so hot all the time, hot in terms of like just sugar and just like burning carbs, and it's like, if you can grow that capacity to be able to burn fat at a really high economic level, you don't tap into those sugar stores as bad. So, so when I train, I don't eat for the first 2 hours. Like, it's just, you just had a big breakfast, right? You're pretty full, like, and you start to create a little bit of a caloric deficit, but your body does learn to utilize what's already in it. And then I kind of settle into a bar or its equivalent every hour for the rest of that training ride. And that can be a full like Cliff Bar. That could be like a gel and a little stroopwafel together, or every 30 minutes or whatever that is. Right. But, and then racing, I closely follow that, but I start eating like pretty immediately, like hour 1 bar, and just start going from there. And then more often as you get closer to the end of the race, gels every 20 or 30 minutes, that kind of thing.
What's your kind of like go-to? You mentioned like you'll eat before a training ride. Do you know like how many calories or grams of carbs is in something like that? Like, or what's your go-to that you eat to sustain you for those 2 hours before you start fueling during?
I mean, it's just breakfast. I mean, I played that game so long, I got deep into the weeds of calorie counting and number crunching in my earlier World Tour years when I was very young, hungry pro. It's unfortunate that a lot of people fall into that. And I think, it can't even be classified, I think, as a mild eating disorder at some point. It's the things I've seen guys do in the World Tour to cut weight it's not healthy. It's not a healthy relationship with food. I haven't always had a healthy relationship with food, even though I love it, you know, it's, but so you have to, yeah, just, and I think that's part of anyone who gets to a certain level in sport though, is like, you have to know like the good and the bad of everything you put in your body, right? Like, you know, so, you know, do I want this? Do I really need this? You know, and is it gonna help make me gain weight, you know, or whatever it is? And I do hope someday that I can like just grab something and just eat it and never think about that, you know. But I think like it's so ingrained in athletes at a certain point where like I will always know how many calories is in that apple. And like once it's a fact and you know that fact, like how can you actually forget that too, you know? So I mean, obviously in off season, sometimes you just don't care, but that's, you know, so but yeah, you know, so in terms of breakfast, I just, you know, I do what works for me. Racing is almost always oatmeal, loaded up oatmeal, a bunch of dried fruits, honey, that kind of stuff. Yogurt granola is another good one.
Yummy. I love that.
Yeah, but you know, just have a big breakfast and be super satiated, and then you know, a couple hours later, start pedaling.
Yes, I think there's something to be said for that. It's like, especially with where you are and what your past experience, I'm sure over the thousands of training sessions you've done, you've had plenty of experimentation of what things and timing works well for you, you know, and you have a system, right?
And it's everyone's different. And you know, it's really interesting. I was listening to a team chef. In the World Tour, everyone has team chefs, right? You got to make sure your food is safe, you know, no food poisoning, the right nutrition, make sure it tastes good. And she brought up an interesting point, which I 100% agree with, is you really, your nationality and culture dictate what you fuel well on.
Oh,
like a bunch of Anglos, like my, you know, us Americans, the Aussies, you know, we tend to race really well on wheat, you know, oatmeal, cereals, because it's kind of what you grow up burning and using. And or no, sorry, grain. We race well on grain based. And then like the Italians and the French are very wheat based. Like they want pasta, you know, for their race meal. And if they do like toasts and oatmeals, like they don't actually go as well. So it is interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I that makes sense to some extent, right? As you think about just like how we've evolved, and I mean, everything down to the different types of carbohydrate receptors in the small intestine and digestive enzymes and all of that stuff, what your systems are used to. So yeah, it is fascinating, but I think you're spot on with like the people need to experiment with their own individual nutrition, and following your exact race breakfast for me might not work well, or vice versa. Right. And, you know, some people might feel like they still have it sitting in their stomach and they're burpy, and, you know, so playing around with that, I think, is important. So kind of taking that breakfast and then diving into a racing situation, you mentioned bars, you said some stroopwafels, things like that. I think you said Cliff Bars are one of your go-tos, right?
Yeah, I love them, and they're one of my longest running sponsors, but no plug. I think they are great. I think it's hard to find. They're so classic, and they're a glorified cookie in a good way, right? Like it's just there's all sorts of good ingredients in there. So yeah, I mean, I still find it hard to like when you have a full dense Cliff Bar, like you feel good and strong for like another hour, you know, like on the pressure. So, I mean, that's just, you can't fight that. That's I'm a big fan of like the OG Cliff Bar still.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. The Cliff Bars are excellent. And then the stroopwafels you mentioned too, I mean, do you ever have trouble? One of the things I run into with some of my athletes is like, if you're breathing really hard, sometimes the like crumbliness of a stroopwafel they struggle with versus like a bar that maybe is a little bit more tolerable, or a gel, like timing that stroopwafel accordingly, maybe when you're not sucking down air as much.
Friend. Density, moisture. Yeah, when they're already crumbled up in the package too, that's no good.
Yeah, it's hard.
A good tip is break them into halves or even quarters, get them like more of like a big bite, like a thick brick of it, and just wrap that in like some aluminum foil. So you can easily unfold the foil, pop the whole thing in like one bite instead of dealing with like this waffle that's crumbling in your hands. And
genius. They'll probably
single bites.
They're probably gonna like restructure their stroop waffle now to like come out in a different format.
A stroop block.
Yeah. It's genius. I mean, there's all these little things that we learn from our athletes that they've done that us as practitioners maybe would have never thought of. I had one athlete tell me that they took I think it was Cliff Blocks, and they would lick them and then stick them to the top of their bike tube.
I've seen triathletes do that, and that's so gross. There's like just everything, all the dirt and grime, and on the road, there's still road grime, which is
Well, so what's funny is the person who was doing this was an Xterra triathlete, so it was getting plenty of dirt on it, I'm sure. So just all the different little things that people do that seem to work for them. But yeah, there's it's pretty funny. But I like the stroop waffle stack. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And with something like that, I mean, talking about, let's see, you just did Big Sugar, right?
I did.
Okay. And that was last weekend or 2 weekends ago?
Last weekend.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe let's talk about the nutrition for that. I mean, do you, talking hour by hour, do you kind of, again, kind of lay out like, okay, I need, I don't know, 27 stroop waffles. Maybe it's not that much, but like,
the night before I get out, I'm such a visual guy. I need to just see the pattern. So I basically lay out my jersey, back open where the pockets are, and I lay out my food, and it's like this is going to go in each pocket, so I know where it is in my pocket and where I need to grab, right? So Big Sugar, the winning time is going to be about 5 hours, right? Say 5.5 in case something goes down. You also know that there's aid stations if you need to grab something. So I put in one side of my pockets was some denser stuff. So I think I had a full Cliff bar. I had a Cliff Kids bar, which is more like a cookie that's like really easy to digest. Actually, that's really popular as cyclists right now. I think those are actually my favorite. But those are like small. They're like a half size almost too. So you would need 2 of them. So I think I had 2 Cliff Kids. So that was hour 1 Cliff bar, hour 2 Cliff Kids bars throughout that hour.
Nice.
Hour 3 there was 2 packs of blocks. And I already tear open the top and just shove those in my pocket, so you don't have to worry about littering and taking more time off a bumpy road to open something. You can just start pulling it with that fancy tube they have. And then and that got me to the last 2 hours of the race. So that was 2 hours worth of gels. So I think I had 4 gels in my pocket. One of them's caffeine. 3 of them are just normal, different flavors, like you said, variety. As far as hydration, I kind of just do 1 with mix and 1 with water on the bike, and then refill those at the aid stations.
Nice. And so with the bottles you're talking about, you mentioned sometimes you'll do a little bit of a thicker, or like it sounds like fuel in the bottle kind of thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You just got to be careful with that because, and you got to practice it before, because you can get basically an entire bar's worth of nutrition out of a drink mix now, but it won't mess your gut. It won't dehydrate you with how they do these isotonic things, but it's not going to hydrate you. So we think about like, if you have like a super thick drink mix on your bottle, right? The Super Fuels, the Martin 360s, whatever that stuff is, like, you are basically drinking nutrition, but that bottle will not be your hydration. So then you're relying on your other 1 water bottle to hydrate your sweat loss and all of that stuff. So it's really easy to get dehydrated with these drink mixes now. And they're so popular in road racing because, again, they're like, throw your hand up, go back to the car and get another fresh bottle, or send your teammate back there if you're the team leader. So they don't deal with that the same. But when you're thinking of self-sufficiency, like, you really have to worry about dehydration and cramps. So, cold mornings, I'll probably start with, a dense caloric mix on one of them. But then as the day warms up and we go on, and you're starting to get more dehydrated, it'll probably be more of like a pure water and more of like one of the lighter drink mixes, right? Your 180 calorie type, Scratch Labs classic hydration or whatever it is.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's helpful for people too, I think also that helps just for like the nerves pre-race is like having a system and knowing what your nutrition is right ahead of time. And so you know how much to pack and bring, and that, so you're not the person that's like running to the booths at the event that morning using like things you've never tried during the race, we usually try and avoid the no new things on race day situation. So with that, you said it was a 5-hour duration. Do you recall how many bottles you went through over something like that, or was hoping to go through?
I used a full 6. There was 2 on the bike and there was 2 aid stations. So every time I came through, I had my mechanic there with spare bottles. And even if they still had water in them, I just chucked them and got 2 freshies.
Awesome.
So
that's great.
I finished with a bit in my, like, I didn't drink the full 6, but that's what I used.
That's great. So just probably a little over a bottle an hour, right? Kind of.
Like 1.5 probably.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. I think that is helpful for people as well. I had, do you know Sally Fu?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just talking to him and he was saying how he just did that training in Colorado and he has not, I don't think, gone to like true altitude. And he was saying he went from 1 bottle per hour on the bike here. And then he said he was doing 3 bottles per hour up in Colorado. So he's got to was like very surprised.
That's part of the whole acclimation thing. Altitude's a diuretic. So.
Yes. Okay. So I want to be mindful of your time because I know you got 2 little babies to get to and a wife, daddy duty. But let's tie it up with telling us a little bit about Stetina's Pay Dirt and where people can find you. What is Stetina's Pay Dirt? When is it? And when's the next one?
That is my attempt to give back to this sport that's given me so much. It's a gravel event in Carson City, Nevada, just on the eastern slope of Tahoe. Awesome. Whole cool mountain range that's been very unexplored. But it's not just about the race, so we kind of divide it up by time segments. So, sometimes you're on the clock and you can hit it against your friends or your competitors, and then you stop and you cross the mat out there and then you regroup, and there's hot dogs in the middle of the mountain range, and there's athletic brewing, like Summit Cheers, like they just have beers on top of this mountaintop up there and you can just crack and non-alcoholic, but because you have to keep riding, but so we have a lot of fun with that. In my attempt to help be a change, we highlight the women first and foremost. There's a pretty decent women's prize purse.
Amazing.
We really champion the women's race and make that like kind of the main show. The guys' race is still important. There's still a nice podium and all that, but there's proper prize money at the women's race.
Amazing.
And a lot of the marketing is focused around that, as well as some adaptive athletes. I work with the High Fives Foundation, so
awesome.
Bike everybody on the bike.
I love it. I love it.
It's May 20th.
May 20th. All right. Yeah.
We have not opened reg. Tomorrow I finally have a meeting to get going on next year. But
amazing.
Soon.
Yes. And what's the distance that
it's not crazy. It's 60 miles, two really big climbs to deal with. It's more of an experience there. It's not this day and age of harder, faster, longer. Everyone's trying to one up each other in difficulty. Like, this is just a really solid day on the bike. The winner could even be like something like 3 hours if they really went for it. But it still takes most people like 4 to 5, which is a good day on the bike.
Yeah. And this is all gravel, right?
Yes.
See, Mia, you and I need to get a gravel bike.
You do.
I rode my first gravel bike at RPI in Idaho this last
great
RPI. And I have to say, I now realize why people can go so far on them compared to a mountain bike, just how efficient they are. Yes. It is incredible. And my heart rate stayed so much lower than on the mountain bike. I'm like, oh my goodness, this thing's amazing. So one day we'll get over there, Nia, but we'll include if the link is out yet, we'll include it in the show notes by the time this goes out. If it's out, let us know. And then of course we have to reveal what your lie was.
Oh, yeah. Gosh, what did I tell you they were? Okay. Yeah.
Chipotle burgers.
Well, yeah. Chipotle does not make burgers, actually.
Oh, burritos. Sorry.
If they did, a Mexican burger, I bet there's a market for that.
Yeah.
It is, unfortunately, and it's one of my biggest disappointments in my athletic career is I do not have the wheelie gene. I can't pop a wheelie to save my life. I really wish that was going to be my pandemic project, and lockdown was just in the backyard trying to wheelie, and I just never got to it.
One day.
No wheelie gene. And I guess I kind of double lied because, like you said, Nia, it wasn't just burritos. That's just where my mind was. But I got all the free Chipotles. Yeah, they were a sponsor, and they gave us this big, heavy metal card, stainless steel, with your name engraved in it. It says,
oh my goodness.
Entitled to free burritos for 2012 or whatever the years it was, right? And I abused that thing so hard, but it was amazing. And then as far as 14ers, everyone hikes 14ers in Colorado. It's very popular. I'm not a hiker. Mount Evans is paved, though. You can ride a bike over 14,000 feet, and there's a race that goes up it every year. I've ridden up Mount Evans quite a few times.
That's amazing. Awesome. Well, I'm happy to hear you got 3 years of free Chipotle.
It was amazing.
And I'm sure the wheelie gene will kick in eventually. Where can
maybe with
people,
the kids?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where can people find you on the socials, or I think you have a website?
Got a website. There's a contact form if you want to go deeper, and if there's always a question and stuff like that. Interview requests, that kind of thing. I do a lot of the Instagram. That's probably my most prevalent. Try to answer everything on there too. So P Stetina, just P instead of Peter. I also have the Twitter and the Strava. So it's a big part of what I do work-wise nowadays, for good and bad. That's another conversation on social media, but
awesome. Yep. And any other races coming up? Are you going into your off season right now?
I am done. I shut it down after Big Sugar. Focus on the family now and house projects. And I have an aversion to being competitive in November. There has to be a line drawn somewhere. So
I hear that. Well, thank you again so much for your time. This was amazing, super informative. Love the little tips with the Stroop waffles. And we hope to have you back and dive into more supplement stuff down the road. I would imagine we didn't even get to cover any of that stuff yet.
We didn't even get to supplements.
Awesome.
Everyone take beta alanine. That's the one. That's all I'll say. That's the one that's tried and true, and you really feel a difference. Of all the things companies pushed me over my whole career, beta alanine that's the one, and it's legal.
Yes. We'll definitely have to have you back then. We could dive into the whole dosing protocol, timing, all that fun stuff. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter.
All righty. Yeah, thanks for the chat. That was fun.